I want to begin by, first of all, thanking Forum for putting together this really beautiful, wonderful event, and for the speakers who have spoken before me. I'll be leaning on them a little bit as I go along. So I call this talk Creativity and Social Capital because I want to challenge the concept that we are beginning to measure everything in money. This was really not the case in most of human history. There was religion, there was nationalism, there were other things. But now it seems increasingly we are measuring things in money, and I think that that's issue. So I have a lot of my work relates to what I call social capital, because I believe communities have this amazing strength that we tend to overlook. And then my efforts at actually challenging the concept of just money with creating an alternative money that I'll talk about briefly. So how can cities promote individual and collective creativity? Enrique, before me, the first speaker, the keynote speaker, talked a lot about the public realm. And I want to also reinforce that, and also the density of interactions. The Garment District in New York, or Wall Street in New York, or many places around the world, you know, that are very creative, that are known for being creative, like Silicon Valley. Why are they creative? They're creative because people from different areas, different different diverse people can come and interact. So the density of interactions is very important. So how do we design cities for that? And I want to talk briefly about that. We also talked a little bit about mixed income, mixed use developments. And since the period of modernism, we have stopped doing that, but we really need to think about doing that. So I'll talk about that, and about social capital, and then the social infrastructure we need for creativity. So let me go back to the time, the high time of modernism, when people like Corbusier said that the street is a bad thing for us. It's an urban enemy. And today, it seems like such a strange thing, but people bought into that. The whole world actually bought into that. Every school of architecture was creating modernist mega projects. And I was actually, when I went to School of Architecture, it was still like that. It took the world a long time to recover from that. And what the modernists were saying was that the cities should really be changed. So the image on your left is the plan that Corbusier proposed for the center of Paris. There was a competition about the center of Paris, and Enrique said that he loves Paris. It makes you feel good. But Corbusier proposed that you should drop bombs on the center of Paris and clean it all up and build tall concrete buildings that would be fed by cars. So it sounds like such a counterintuitive thing, but I want to tell you that it kept happening all through history, and it's again happening today in many, many countries, particularly India, China, Brazil, countries that are building up very fast. On the right is a beautiful building, yes, very beautiful, but then where is the public realm? Where is the place for the pedestrian? The Indian pedestrian is in streets like that, which are quite marvelous and very vibrant and wonderful. But then, yes, and when people live together, the public realm is active, wonderful things happen. These young men are actually climbing on each other to break apart on the top, because there's a festival in Mumbai where they invoke Lord Krishna breaking a buttermilk pot. So they do amazing things. But this can only happen if there is a public realm. But this is what we are building in Mumbai today. And this. And then it will change. But the public realm is missing here, because if you look here, what happens is that the developer gets a bonus for providing public space. But the public space is on the 6th floor, right? But he got the bonus, but the street died, and the public realm suffers. And this is happening ad nauseum in many, many developing or rapidly developing countries. Okay. Yeah, there we go. And it's not just in India. This is Nanjing Street in Shanghai. Many of you might have visited. It's full of life. It's full of vibrancy. But what is getting built in China today is this. Great buildings, nice picture postcard, but if you look on the ground floor, it's very, very difficult to even walk from one building to another, and this is called Central Park, but there's like 6 lanes very fast in the middle, and nobody actually gets to the Central Park. So, this is the kind of cities we are building, and the question is, Enrique said it, a lot of us are saying that, but who's listening, and why are these projects happening? This is Tokyo, and the streets are marvelous. Street is the ultimate public space, but that's not what we keep building today. So the question is, why is this happening? If it's so intuitive, and if we all love public realm and the streets, so why do these faceless housing developments? Like you go on the outskirts of Mumbai or Delhi, as far as your eye can see, you see these towers in the park. It's because of money. That means that the developer, it's fastest and quickest. So in the neoliberal economy, the neoliberal economy knows how to make housing in a most efficient way, but it doesn't know how to make housing for everybody. So that is a problem, but these things keep on getting built because there is money to be made. So I want to question that why are we measuring everything in terms of money? We need to have more parameters. So URBS is one of the 2 nonprofits that I co-founded and I head. And we call it user-generated cities, and our office is in Mumbai. And, okay, I'll come back to that. But this is, we challenge the concept that how are you going to, top-down cannot work in Mumbai, because 700 new migrants arrive in Mumbai every single day. Every single day. And every month, about 600 new cars come on the road. So how is the city going to manage? There is no way that a top-down solution can work. So it has to be something bottom-up, something top-down. So the cities have to be user-generated. So this is what we... the concept that we started with, and we have worked in Mumbai, but also in Tokyo. This was a workshop we held in Tokyo, because in Tokyo, right after the war, the government didn't have the money to bulldoze areas that were almost slum-like, but the government had the money to provide infrastructure. And once the government provided infrastructure, people fixed up their own homes and they became nice communities. Now, Tom talked about redevelopment, where you saw these big buildings falling down. That's what developers like to do, because there's more money in that. But actually, there is a very much more gentler, nicer way of doing it, which is what we promoted in Tokyo in workshops like this. People come from around the world, join us for these workshops, and we help the communities envision a newer neighborhood, a newer future, usually with incremental development and user-led development. And we've had the opportunity to work in Istanbul and trying to engage local people with several universities. But most of our work has been in Dharavi, which is a bigger, very big informal settlement in Mumbai. If any of you saw Slumdog Millionaire, you probably saw that. And from here, it looks a little bit dismal. But let me take you inside that, and I'll show you it's a really vibrant community of craftsmen. It's really not a slum. It gets called a slum because then the government has a right to go and bulldoze it and redevelop it. So we created this dharavi.org website, and local people used it, and it became, and it still is, one of the most reliable sources of information. So Dharavi may look shabby, but that's primarily because the government has not provided infrastructure, because it's a very valuable real estate right in the heart of the city. So really, every developer and every government dreams of developing it. But what does development really mean? So this is Friday night, and they close one lane, or half the street, and it becomes a wonderful mosque on Friday night. Then Dharavi has also a large Christian community and a Hindu community. They all have their festivals. They organize with each other and arrange beautiful festivals. There's a lot of joy, hope, and happiness in the neighborhood. So I call that social capital. And the thing is, how can you take this social capital and help user-generated development rather than saying, let's bring in the bulldozers so some developer will make a lot of money, but the community will be dissolved and broken and probably sent far away from the city from which they'll have to commute for 2-3 hours. That is what we don't want to happen in a place like Mumbai. Cities must be inclusive, they must be for everybody, and the public realm must be for everybody. So we think it's a beautiful community. This is the fish market that's completely run by women. When the fish is done, then they clean it up. It becomes like a social space. And we actually, in one of our workshops, one participant, they compare it with Naples. Okay, guess which one is Naples? You go to Naples for tourism, but the urban fabric in Dharavi is very similar because it's a 400-year-old fishing village that actually grew to be Dharavi. Dharavi actually contributes over $1 billion to Mumbai's economy every year, and yet it gets called a slum, and every developer dreams of tearing it down and putting up skyscrapers. So we did a lot of user-based research, visual narratives. We involved people, children, everybody who's willing to work with us. And we've created a big body of research, which has actually helped to resist the redevelopment plans that several developers had proposed. This was the plan of the latest development. There have been so many development plans, but people of Dharavi have now learned to resist them very effectively. With our and many other NGOs are working there as well. But this developer would have liked to come in, just bulldoze the whole thing, divide it up into those different color blocks, very neat looking, and then all the people would be pushed into this blue rehab building, and then the green building would be market rate. So it seems like a good idea for redevelopment, but the thing is that people in Dharavi are craftsmen, so they use the street for setting up their retail pushcart, perhaps, and the potters use the public space for their raw material. So how is that going to happen in the apartment? And also in the apartment, you don't really get to see each other, so the street is lost, right? So once the street is lost, which is the primary public space, then people will lose touch with each other. So if I'm watching somebody's child when they go to work or they go to a doctor, that's not going to happen anymore. So people have really realized that, and so this redevelopment plan did not happen. And actually, there is now Dharavi Self-Development Corporation. Why should an outside developer come and develop this prime piece of land in the middle of Mumbai? Rather, people should be able to do it on their terms. So this is where we are at this moment. Another nonprofit I founded and head is called Asia Initiative, which tries to do in rural areas what URBS does in urban areas. And we have a big focus on women, because if you help women, you help the whole family and then the community. So it seems to be the most efficient way to work. And so this is SOX. It's a social capital credits. It's a transformative community currency for leveraging social capital for creativity and social good. We have a stock market. If it sounds like stock market, it's not just a coincidence. It's very much that we do want to challenge that everything should be measured with money. So we go into communities and we create SOC earning and SOC spending menus. And so for every community, it's different. We work very closely and help people to realize what their strengths are, what are they willing to do for the projects they would like to see in the community, and what are those things worth. So then, for example, care of the community commons. Community commons is a really big deal now because traditionally it used to be that people just took care of the village pond or the urban commons, but that's not happening anymore because everybody is kind of busy in their own life and measuring everything in terms of money. So I think that that's really an important thing to think about. Who's going to watch the community commons? And then, of course, the global commons. We are at the edge of this climate change, and the governments are simply not taking it seriously. So I think we have become not so good at watching for the commons. So perhaps SOCs can help with that. Then the community kitchen gardens, organizing community events, like the type you were doing, although I think your world is very different from these people's world, but still. And mentoring youth, yes. So Tom talked about in his community where the people in the social housing, they were able to live in the social housing, but give so many hours to the children that they were helping. So we are doing something quite like that through SOCs. And then there's a redemption menu. For example, in our project in Ghana, the government is accepting electricity bills in terms of SOCs. And in Costa Rica, where also we are working on, at the invitation of the government, the mayor's office, they are providing internet in return for SOCs. Then there are issues of senior care. Yes, the state can do it, but you don't want that to become an impersonal thing. I think happiness is about people interacting with each other, and you don't want to lose that. You want to encourage that. And childcare, use of community commons. So these are just one sample menu. Every community has different menu items that they set up. So right now we are doing this in Costa Rica, in Ghana, in Kenya, and several places in India. I'm just going to give you a few quick examples. This is in Ghana. It's in Bantama market in Kumasi. It's a market completely run by women. And they were actually not even taking time to get their own health checks, HIV/AIDS tests and so on. They didn't realize how vulnerable they were. And they were so poor that they said, no, I don't want to take time. I need to sell these tomatoes. And so now they are getting SOCs for getting their own health checks and for sending daughters to school, planting trees, because in poor areas, people use wood for firewood. So they cut down the trees that they actually need for shade. So we are encouraging people to plant trees and nurture them. And the SOCs can be spent on school fees, joining a microcredit group, or telephone talk time. A lot of these women have cheap phones, but they don't have money to put talk time into that. So usually in poor communities when we work, what is on the spending menu is usually healthcare, education, skill empowerment, and other urgent things like telephone talk time. This is a beautiful project in South India because the wells get silted. Once the wells get silted, you can only get one crop. But these are community wells, and so we are encouraging people to desilt them so they could get 2 or 3 crops in a year, which doubles or triples their income. So then the big question is, if those same people came and desilted the wells, why didn't they do that before? What were they waiting for? There wasn't a system that could say, okay, if you did 10 hours of work and you did 20 hours of work, this is what it's worth. So now that the system is there, people are actually doing it quite nicely by themselves. This is in Rajasthan in India, where people are earning SOCs for waste management, tutoring again for children, and kitchen gardens, and in turn they can take computer training and other skill classes. We were doing all this recording on this sort of SOC passbooks, but now we have an online system that I will show you briefly. We also have Sockpreneurs, these are young entrepreneurs, and we fund them for their business, but their business has to have a social component, and part of the funds have to go into a big community sock pool so the community can benefit. And this beautiful young lady has started a business in Dharavi, because Dharavi, as I told you, is really not a slum, it's a village of craftsmen. And a lot of them create leather goods that actually sell in Neiman Marcus around the world in big world capitals. I don't know if it sells in Perth, in Neiman Marcus, but I know it does in New York and London. So she set up an online marketing system that is a for-profit business, but then part of the profit goes into a sock pool for the community. And if the craftsmen earn socks, they can use the socks to put an exhaust fan in their workshop, so they're not having to smell the leather glue or something, and or have another window so there's cross breeze, or improve their home or improve their workshop. This is another fun project in South India. It's in Madurai. And here, there is a huge tradition of community creativity. They do a big festival in April. I don't know if you've heard about Lord Shiva, but Lord Shiva and his wife Parvati, their marriage is celebrated for about a month every year. And at the end of the marriage, a priest sneezes. And that means that the marriage is not complete. That means it has to be done again next year. So they've been actually doing it for about 2,000 years. But they all get together, and there's dancing, and there's crafts, and there's theater, and every sort of art you can think about. But in the middle of this town, there's this river, which is called Vaigai River. It's not a perennial river, but still a nice river. And it's now, like in the bottom picture, it's quite polluted now. And of course, the government built a dam for drinking water, but that meant that the river is now really marginalized. But it is a sacred river. So what we are doing is we are working with the community that on this big festival they have, which is called Chaturai Festival, we are going to add a component of river restoration. So bringing the community into the river restoration project. So what we've done is the length of the river that goes to the city, we've divided it up into small portions. And the poor communities that live on the side of the river, we've said, okay, now you can become custodians of the river. And for making sure that there's no raw sewage coming in, and there's no dumping, and there's no construction debris put in the river, you will earn socks, which you can then trade for healthcare, education, and getting a rainwater harvesting system built on your roof, and also toilets. So that's what we are doing here. So this is just, you see how many people come on the river. It's such an important part of their lives. But then the thing was, who's going to take care of the river restoration? Is it the government? The government can't do it. The government really doesn't have the resources, especially if everybody else is polluting it. How can the government keep it clean? So it has to be a community-led project. And so that is what we are doing now. And this is the kinds of headdress that people have designed. And there's going to be a big march, actually, starting on April 20th and going into May. And this is more of that. So we sat very closely with the communities, decided what the sock menus should be, and then set up a system. So who's going to do what, and what are they going to earn for that. I'm going to be there actually from 25th of June to 7th of July, if anybody wants to come and join us. So this is in Costa Rica, where the mayor invited us to work with. This is not a poor community. This is like a middle-income community. But the issue was the global commons. One is that children were not safe playing outside in the playgrounds because perhaps they might get kidnapped or something like that. They were not even safe walking to school. And then the public spaces were getting derelict, and sometimes there would be drug issues. So these women formed like a group, so they take turns to sit outside their homes at the time the children are walking to school to make sure that they are safe, and then also taking care of the the public spaces, and they earn internet time. So SOCs work by, they bring communities together, they promote care of the community commons and strengthen social capital, which I think is the critical part of every city. Cities are about social capital, they are not about buildings, they are not about streets, they are about social capital, so cities have to be built to encourage and nurture that social capital. SOCs work a little bit like carbon credits or like airline loyalty points. I'm sure many of you have airline loyalty points, and so they work like that. So it's Asia Initiatives, a local partner. We don't have staff in local locations. We always work with the local government or a local partner. And then somebody from the community becomes a community manager. And then community is the biggest piece. Then we have sample menus that we present to communities, and people choose or they create their own. People are very creative. They know what their issues are, and they know how they're going to solve them. And the other thing that is really important is that every time somebody is earning what we call ISOCs, individual SOCs, then 1/5 of that goes into another big pot, that is the ComSOCs, the community SOCs. And the reason to do that is to create pressure, like in the case of Ghana, I showed you the market. What is happening there is that women, if they go get their health check, their community is also earning points with which they can perhaps be a childcare center, or their streets can be repaired. So there is social pressure. So I will tell my friend, why don't you also go do it? So, so it kind of works very nicely. And also for people to feel very proud that they are doing something that's good for their community. And I think that's really quite important. Actually, we have a system of SOC stars. So people who earn a lot of SOCs, we acknowledge them. In Ghana, because it's such a singing and dancing culture, you can't actually have a meeting without every half an hour everybody gets up and they do a little dance or something, then they sit down for the rest of the meeting. Maybe we should have done that here today. Celebrating community good, celebrating social good, celebrating somebody's propensity to help in the social good, I think is really important, something that we've been losing over time that we want to bring back with SOCs. This is our SOC market, the digital SOC platform. So it has, there's a local partner interface. There is, so the local partner can create menus, monitor who's earning how many points. Then there's a manager interface who can approve. So somebody, when they earn points, they can then log them in, and then the manager goes in and then approves the points so that then the person can go and redeem them even at school, where they might pay school fees, or at a health clinic where they might get health checks and so on. So the new community members are registered. Actually, in some of our projects, this was the first time that people got their picture taken, and they had to sign, and they were so proud of being part of a community that can do works and do something good together. And then, so there's approving, and then there's a user interface. So it's, we've just now created the beta version of this, and we are expecting to create the bigger platform in the next few months. And so some people, actually many people in our project cannot even read and write. So we had to think about creating a voice-based system. So people would be able to call on the telephone, and the voice would say, if you're earning SOCs, press 1, or if you planted a tree, press this. So that's something we are working on, because many of our communities, people are not yet literate. So this is some of the ways that we are trying to challenge the paradigm that everything should be measured in money, and with some success so far, but we look forward to crowdsourcing your ideas, so please do not hesitate to advise. Thank you.